After paying for a burger for an old man, the McDonald's manager fired her. 2 hours later, Sarah Johnson, 35, stood before the mirror, adjusting her red and yellow McDonald's apron for the umpteenth time that morning. Every wrinkle in her uniform seemed a reminder of the daily struggles she faced. With a sigh, she glanced at the clock on the wall. There were still 4 hours left in her shift. "Order ready for table 5, shouted the cook from the kitchen. Sarah grabbed the tray and headed to the indicated table. As she walked, her mind wandered to her 16-year-old daughter Emma, who would be getting out of school at that moment. She wondered if she had remembered to take her asthma medication. Then, as always, her thoughts shifted to her mother, Mrs. Johnson, and the worry over her growing medical expenses. "Here you go, sir. Enjoy," Sarah said with a tired but genuine smile, placing the tray in front of a middle-aged man. She returned to the counter just in time to see an elderly man enter. He walked slowly, leaning on a cane, and his eyes scanned the menu with some confusion. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you?" Sarah asked kindly. The elderly man looked at her with watery eyes and a shy smile. "Good afternoon, young lady. I'd like a coffee and maybe a small burger. I haven't eaten anything since the morning." Sarah nodded and began to take the order. When it came time to pay, the elderly man searched his pockets with trembling hands. He pulled out some coins and counted them with difficulty. "I'm very sorry," he finally said, his voice breaking with shame. "It seems I don't have enough. I thought I had enough. Excuse me, I'll just go." Sarah's heart tightened. Without a second thought, she pulled out her own wallet. "Don't worry, sir. I've got it," she said quietly, swiping her card through the reader. The elderly man looked at her with surprise and gratitude. "Oh, I can't, young lady. That's very kind, but—" "I insist," Sarah interrupted with a warm smile. "We all need a hand sometimes. Please enjoy your meal." With tears in his eyes, the elderly man took his tray and sat at a nearby table. Sarah watched him for a moment, feeling a mix of satisfaction and concern. She knew she would miss that money, but she couldn't bear the thought of someone going hungry. What Sarah didn't notice was the cold gaze of her co-worker, Mark, who had witnessed the entire scene from the adjacent register. With a twisted smile, he headed to the manager's office. The rest of the shift passed without incident. Sarah was cleaning tables when the manager, a stern-faced man named John, called her to his office. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She knew that tone of voice, and it never boded well. "Sarah, we need to talk," John said, closing the door behind her. Sarah's stomach knotted with apprehension, unaware that this moment would be the catalyst for a journey that would test her integrity, challenge her convictions, and ultimately change not just her life, but the lives of many others. As she sat down across from John, Sarah couldn't have imagined the series of events her simple act of kindness had set in motion. She was about to embark on a path that would lead her through ethical dilemmas, corporate conspiracies, and personal threats, all while trying to balance her responsibilities to her family, her colleagues, and her own moral compass. The fluorescent lights of the office buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across John's face. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever was to come. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of a story that would ultimately redefine her understanding of leadership, integrity, and the power of doing what's right, no matter the cost. "Sarah," John began, his voice stern and unyielding, "I've been informed that you paid for a customer's meal with your own money today. Is that true?" Sarah blinked, surprised. "Yes, sir, it was an elderly man who didn't have enough money. I couldn't let him go hungry." John sighed heavily. "Sarah, I understand your good intentions, but that goes against company policy. And we can't allow employees to pay for customers. It creates accounting problems and can lead to complicated situations." "But sir," Sarah pleaded, feeling panic start to overtake her, "it was just this once. I promise it won't happen again." "I'm sorry, Sarah," John said, his face impassive. "You've already received warnings for being late due to your mother's health problems. The company requires employees to follow the rules to the letter. I'm afraid I have to let you go." The words fell like a punch to Sarah's stomach. "Please, Mr. John," she begged, her voice trembling. "I need this job. My daughter, my mother." But John was already extending an envelope with her severance pay. "I'm sorry, Sarah. Collect your things and turn in your uniform before you leave." With trembling legs, Sarah left the office. Tears threatened to overflow, but she held them back. She wouldn't cry, not here. She took her belongings from the locker, changed mechanically, and walked out the back door of the restaurant. Once on the street, the tears began to fall. How would she pay the bills now? How would she keep Emma in school and afford her mother's medications? As she walked to the bus stop, a thought crossed her mind. Had she done the right thing by helping that old man? For a moment doubt engulfed her, but then she remembered the gratitude in the man's eyes and knew that despite the consequences, she didn't regret her action. With a shaky sigh, Sarah boarded the bus. She didn't know what the future held, but she was determined to face it with the same compassion and strength that had always defined her. The bus rumbled through the city streets. Sarah's phone buzzed. It was Emma. "Mum, where are you? Grandma's not feeling well, and I can't find her medication." Sarah's heart raced. "I'm on my way home, sweetie. Stay calm. Check the kitchen cabinet above the sink. There should be a blue pill bottle there." The call ended, and Sarah leaned her head against the cool glass of the bus window. The weight of her responsibilities bore down on her like never before. She had to find a new job, and fast. The days turned into weeks, and Sarah's situation grew increasingly desperate. She applied for every job she could find, from fast food joints to retail stores, but nothing seemed to pan out. The bills piled up, and the fear of not being able to cover expenses grew day by day. One particularly challenging morning, as Sarah sat at her small kitchen table surrounded by unpaid bills and job applications, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find her elderly neighbour, Miss Patterson, looking concerned. "Sarah, dear," Mrs. Patterson began, "I couldn't help but notice you've been home a lot lately. Is everything all right?" Sarah hesitated. Then the dam broke. She found herself telling Miss Patterson everything, losing her job, struggling to find a new one, worrying about her mother's health and Emma's future. Mrs. Patterson listened patiently, then said, "You know, my nephew Robert owns a few businesses in town. Let me give him a call. Maybe he knows of something." Sarah felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. "That would be wonderful, Mrs. Patterson. Thank you." Later that afternoon, Sarah's phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" she answered tentatively. "Is this Sarah Johnson?" a male voice inquired. "Yes, this is she." "Miss Johnson, this is Robert Williams. I believe you know my aunt, Edna Patterson." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, Mrs. Patterson is my neighbour. She mentioned she might speak with you about job opportunities." "Indeed," Robert replied. "I understand you recently worked at McDonald's. I'm actually the owner of that franchise, and I'd like to discuss something with you. Could we meet tomorrow at the Corner Cafe at 2 p.m? Stunned, Sarah agreed. As she hung up, a mix of emotions washed over her. Hope, anxiety, and a nagging question. Why would the franchise owner want to meet with her? The next day, Sarah arrived at the Corner Cafe 5 minutes early. She spotted a well-dressed man sitting alone and approached him. "Mr. Williams." He stood, offering a warm smile and a firm handshake. "Miss Johnson, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Once they were settled with their coffee, Robert began. "Ms. Johnson, I've heard about what happened at the restaurant, about your act of kindness and its unexpected consequences." Sarah tensed, unsure where this was going. Robert continued, "The elderly man you helped that day, he was my father." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "Your father? I had no idea." "Neither did I, until he told me about it later," Robert said, his eyes softening. "My father has early-stage Alzheimer's. Sometimes he wanders off and gets confused. That day he had forgotten his wallet." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm so sorry to hear that, Mr. Williams." "Oh, thank you," Robert nodded. But that's not why I asked you here. When I found out you were fired for that act of kindness, I was outraged. That's not how I want my business to be run." Sarah's heart began to race. Could this mean? "Miss Johnson," Robert leaned forward, his eyes serious, "I'd like to offer you a job. And not just rehire you, but offer you the position of general manager of the restaurant." Sarah was stunned. "General manager? But I've never been a manager. I don't know if I'm qualified." Robert raised a hand to stop her protests. "I've looked into your work history, Sarah. I know you're hard-working, honest, and compassionate. Those are the qualities I'm looking for in a manager. Technical skills can be learned, but integrity and empathy are innate, and you have them in abundance." As the reality of the offer sank in, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This was an incredible opportunity, but it would also come with new challenges and responsibilities. Little did she know accepting this offer would be the first step on a journey that would test her integrity, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately change not just her life, but the lives of many others in ways she could never have imagined. Sarah's first day as general manager at McDonald's dawned bright and full of promise. She woke up before her alarm, a mixture of excitement and nerves bubbling in her stomach. As she got ready, she mentally reviewed everything she wanted to achieve. "Are you nervous, Mom?" Emma asked, watching her from the kitchen doorway. Sarah smiled at her daughter. "A little, honey, but more than anything, I'm excited." "You'll do great," Emma affirmed with the unwavering confidence of youth. "You're the best." With a hug for her daughter and a quick call to check on her mother, Sarah left the house, ready to face her new challenge. Upon arriving at the restaurant, she took a deep breath before entering. The familiar aroma of coffee and freshly baked muffins greeted her, along with the curious and surprised looks of her former co-workers. "Good morning, everyone," Sarah greeted with a smile, trying to project a confidence she wasn't entirely sure she felt. John, the former manager who had fired her, approached with a tense expression. "Sarah, welcome back. Mr. Williams informed us about your new position. I'll be here to help with the transition." Sarah nodded, grateful for the offer despite the evident discomfort. "Thank you, John. I appreciate your help." As the morning progressed, Sarah immersed herself in her new responsibilities. She reviewed schedules, inventories, and financial reports. She soon realized that while there was much to learn, her years of experience on the front lines gave her a unique and valuable perspective. During the lunch rush, Sarah decided to put on an apron and help in the service line. Some employees looked at her with surprise. "What are you doing here, boss?" asked Mark, the same one who had reported her weeks ago, his tone bordering between curiosity and disdain. "We're a team, Mark," Sarah replied calmly, "and sometimes the team needs an extra hand." As she worked alongside them, Sarah noticed how the initial tension began to dissipate. Her former co-workers appreciated seeing that despite her new title, she was still the same Sarah, willing to roll up her sleeves and work hard. At the end of the day, she gathered all the staff for a brief talk. "I want to thank you all for your hard work today," she began. "I know this change can be unsettling for some of you, but I want you to know that my door will always be open. Together we can make this place not only a great restaurant for our customers, but also a great place to work." The reactions were mixed. Some, like Lisa, a cashier who had always been kind to Sarah, smiled openly. Others, like Mark, maintained skeptical expressions. In the days and weeks that followed, Sarah worked tirelessly to earn her team's trust and improve the restaurant's operations. She implemented an anonymous suggestion system for employees, reorganized schedules to give more flexibility to those who studied, and ensured that everyone had adequate breaks during their shifts. She also focused on improving the customer experience. She introduced a reading corner in one area of the restaurant with books donated by the community, organized family nights with activities for children, and made sure the restaurant participated in local community events. However, not everything was rosy. Mark, resentful of Sarah's promotion, began sowing doubts among some employees. "Doesn't it seem strange to you?" Sarah overheard Mark murmuring one day in the break room. Suddenly she's fired, and the next moment she's the boss. Something fishy must have happened. Sarah knew she would have to address this situation soon, but for now she decided to focus on the positives. And there were many. Customers noticed the changes in the more welcoming atmosphere. Sales began to increase, and the restaurant started receiving praise on local social media. One afternoon, while Sarah was closing the office, Lisa timidly approached. Miss Johnson," she began. "Sarah's fine, Lisa," she smiled. "Sarah, I just wanted to say that, well, we're very happy to have you as our manager. You've made so many good changes here." With a lump in her throat, Sarah thanked her for the gesture. It was moments like this when she felt she was truly making a difference. That night, as she dined with Emma and her mother, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed in such a short time. "How's everything at work, dear?" Mrs. Johnson asked. Sarah smiled. "It has its challenges, Mom, but you know what? I think I'm exactly where I need to be." What Sarah didn't know was that soon she would face her biggest challenge yet, a challenge that would test not only her managerial skills, but also her integrity and compassion. As Sarah's journey unfolds, filled with triumphs and tribulations, we invite you to stay tuned. If you're inspired by Sarah's story of resilience and ethical leadership, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you these compelling narratives of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. Join our community and be part of Sarah's incredible journey. 3 months had passed since Sarah assumed the role of general manager, and the restaurant was flourishing under her leadership. Sales had increased by 15%, staff turnover had significantly decreased, and the establishment had become a popular meeting spot in the community. However, Sarah's journey was about to take an unexpected turn. One evening, as Sarah was reviewing the monthly financial reports, something caught her eye. A discrepancy in the numbers, small but noticeable. She frowned, double-checking her calculations. The more she dug, the more irregularities she found. "This can't be right," Sarah muttered to herself, rubbing her tired eyes. She decided to stay late, determined to get to the bottom of this. Hours passed as Sarah pored over financial records from the past year. The discrepancies were subtle, easily overlooked if one wasn't paying close attention. But they were there, and they painted a disturbing picture. It was past midnight when Sarah finally leaned back in her chair, her mind reeling from what she had discovered. There was no doubt about it. Someone had been manipulating the restaurant's financial records. Small amounts of money had been consistently disappearing, cleverly disguised as miscellaneous expenses or inventory discrepancies. Sarah's first instinct was to call Robert Williams, the franchise owner. But as her finger hovered over his number in her phone, she hesitated. What if he was involved? What if reporting this put her job at risk again? She thought of Emma and her mother, of the bills that still needed to be paid. No, she decided. She needed more information before she could act. The next day, Sarah arrived at work earlier than usual. She greeted her employees with her usual warmth, but inside, her mind was racing. Who could be behind this? And how long had it been going on? As she observed the day-to-day operations with new eyes, Sarah couldn't help but notice things she had overlooked before. So Mark's frequent trips to the back office. John, the former manager, still hanging around more often than necessary for the transition. Even Lisa, whom Sarah had considered a friend, seemed to be watching her with an odd intensity. Sarah decided to confide in someone. She chose Angela, the assistant manager whom she had promoted recently. Can I see you in my office for a moment?" Sarah asked casually during a lull in the lunch rush. Once the door was closed, Sarah took a deep breath. "Angela, I need your help with something, but it has to stay between us for now." Angela nodded, her expression serious. "Of course, Sarah. What's going on?" Sarah explained what she had found, watching Angela's face carefully for any reaction. To her relief, Angela seemed genuinely shocked and concerned. That's terrible, Sarah," Angela said, shaking her head. "What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure yet," Sarah admitted, "but I need your help to gather more information. Can I count on you?" Angela reached across the desk and squeezed Sarah's hand. "Absolutely. We'll figure this out together." Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Angela worked discreetly to uncover more about the financial irregularities. They stayed late combing through old records and kept a closer eye on the day-to-day operations. Their investigation led them to a startling discovery. The irregularities dated back years, long before Sarah had even started working at the restaurant. This wasn't just petty theft, it was a systematic embezzlement scheme. One night, as they were piecing together their findings, they heard a noise outside the office. Sarah quickly turned off the computer monitor and pretended to be having a casual conversation with Angela. The door opened and Mark peered in. "Oh, sorry," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "Didn't realize anyone was still here." After he left, Sarah and Angela exchanged worried glances. "We need to be more careful," Angela whispered. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of their discovery pressing down on her. She knew she couldn't keep this to herself much longer. But the more she uncovered, the more dangerous the situation seemed to become. The next day, Sarah received an unexpected visit from Robert Williams. As he walked into her office, Sarah felt her heart race. Did he know? "Sarah," Robert began, his tone serious, "I've noticed some discrepancies in the recent financial reports. Care to explain?" Sarah felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. This was it, the moment of truth. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "Actually, Mr. Williams," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I've been meaning to talk to you about that. I've discovered some irregularities in our financial records." Robert's expression didn't change. "Go on," he said simply. Sarah laid out everything she and Angela had uncovered. As she spoke, she watched Robert carefully, trying to gauge his reaction. Was that guilt flickering in his eyes? Or just concern? When she finished, Robert was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed heavily. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you when I hired you." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What was coming next would change everything. She was sure of it. "The truth is," Robert continued, his voice low, "I knew about these irregularities. Then they've been going on for years, orchestrated by some high-level employees, and I'm ashamed to admit with my knowledge." Sarah felt as if she had been punched in the gut. "But why?" she managed to ask. Robert's face was a mask of regret. It started small. A little creative accounting to help the business through tough times. But it grew. And before I knew it, we were in too deep to easily get out. "Why are you telling me this now?" Sarah asked, her mind reeling. "So because I hired you hoping your integrity would help us course correct without raising suspicions. But I see now that was unfair and, well, frankly cowardly of me." Sarah sat in stunned silence, trying to process this revelation. Everything she thought she knew had just been turned upside down. As she looked at Robert, a man she had come to respect, she realized that her journey had just taken a turn into murky ethical waters. The choices she would make in the coming days would test her integrity like never before. Sarah left the meeting with Robert feeling as if the ground beneath her feet had turned to quicksand. Her mind raced with the implications of what she had just learned. As she walked through the restaurant, the cheerful chatter of customers and the familiar smell of fries felt surreal against the weight of her new knowledge. She caught sight of Mark watching her from behind the counter, his eyes narrowed suspiciously. Sarah forced a smile and nod, all the wondering if he was involved in the financial irregularities. How deep did this go? Who could she trust? That evening, as Sarah drove home, her phone rang. It was Emma. "Mom, where are you?" Grandma's not feeling well again. Emma's voice was tinged with worry. Sarah's heart sank. "I'm on my way, sweetie. Did you call Dr. Thompson?" "Yeah," he said to monitor her blood pressure and call back if it gets worse. Sarah ended the call, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. The stress of her mother's declining health, coupled with the revelation at work, felt overwhelming. When she arrived home, she found Emma sitting beside Miss Johnson on the couch. Her mother's face was pale, her breathing labored. "Mom," Sarah said softly, kneeling beside her. "How are you feeling?" Mrs. Johnson managed a weak smile. "Oh, just a bit under the weather, dear. Don't fuss." But Sarah could see the pain in her mother's eyes. She knew the medical bills were piling up, treatments becoming more frequent and expensive. The weight of her financial responsibilities pressed down on her even more heavily now. After ensuring her mother was stable and resting, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. Emma approached cautiously. "Mom, is everything okay? You seem different lately." Sarah looked up at her daughter, seeing the concern in her eyes. She wanted to protect Emma from the harsh realities she was facing, but she also knew her perceptive daughter deserved some explanation. "Work has been challenging lately, sweetie," Sarah said, choosing her words carefully. "I'm dealing with some complicated issues." Emma sat down across from her. "Is it about money? I heard you on the phone with the hospital billing department yesterday." Sarah felt a pang of guilt. She hadn't realized Emma had overheard that stressful conversation. "We're managing, Emma, don't worry." But Emma wasn't easily deterred. "I could get a part-time job, you know, to help out." "Absolutely not," Sarah said firmly. "Your job is to focus on school. I'll handle everything else." As Emma reluctantly went to bed, Sarah's mind returned to the problem at hand. The financial irregularities at work could be her ticket to solving her family's money problems. A small voice in her head whispered that she could easily skim a little off the top, just enough to cover her mother's medical bills. Who would notice, given the extent of the existing fraud? Sarah shook her head violently, shocked at her own thoughts. That wasn't who she was. That wasn't the example she wanted to set for Emma, but the temptation lingered, a dark cloud at the edges of her consciousness. The next day at work, Sarah felt as if she was walking on eggshells. Every interaction seemed loaded with potential double meanings. Was Lisa's friendly smile genuine, or was she hiding something? When John asked about the monthly reports, was it innocent curiosity or something more sinister? Sarah retreated to her office, feeling paranoid and isolated. She jumped when there was a knock at the door. "Come in," she called, trying to keep her voice steady. It was Angela, looking concerned. "Sarah, is everything all right? You seem on edge." For a moment, Sarah considered confiding in Angela about Robert's revelation, but the memory of Robert's trust in her held her back. Instead, she forced a smile, just a bit stressed with some personal matters, nothing to worry about. Angela didn't look convinced, but she didn't press further. As she turned to leave, she paused. "And you know you can trust me, right, Sarah? Whatever it is, I'm here if you need me." Sarah nodded, feeling a lump in her throat. As the door closed behind Angela, the weight of her isolation pressed down on her even more heavily. That afternoon, Sarah overheard a heated conversation between Mark and Lisa in the break room. "I'm telling you, something's not right," Mark was saying in a low, urgent voice. "Sarah's been acting weird, spending hours in her office. I bet she's discovered something." "Or maybe she's just doing her job," Lisa retorted. "Stop being so paranoid, Mark." Sarah's heart raced, so Mark was suspicious too. She needed to be more careful. As the days passed, the strain began to show. Sarah found herself snapping at employees over minor issues, then feeling guilty about it. She was sleeping poorly, plagued by nightmares of being caught or of her mother's condition worsening. One evening, as Sarah was leaving work, she found a note slipped under her windshield wiper. With trembling hands, she unfolded it. In crude block letters it read, "We know what you know. Keep quiety, Oregon else." Sarah's blood ran cold. She looked around the empty parking lot, suddenly feeling exposed and vulnerable. Who had left the note? What did they mean by "or else"? When she got home that night, she found Emma in tears. "Mom, some kids at school have been saying things. Nasty things about you and your job." Sarah felt as if the walls were closing in on her. "What kind of things, sweetie?" Emma hesitated, then said in a small voice, "They said you're a thief, that you stole money from McDonald's." It's not true, is it, Mom? The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Sarah. Here she was trying to uncover a fraud, and now she was being accused of the very thing she was fighting against. Of course it's not true, Emma, Sarah said, pulling her daughter into a hug. Even as she said it, she wondered how long she could protect Emma from the harsh realities of their situation. That night, as Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, she felt torn between her integrity and her family's needs, between her duty to the truth and her fear of the consequences. The financial irregularities at work now seemed like a Pandora's box, and she wasn't sure if she had the strength to face what might come out of it. As dawn broke, Sarah made a decision. She couldn't continue like this, trapped between secrets and threats. She needed to take action to regain control of the situation. But as she steeled herself for what was to come, she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever she did next would have far-reaching consequences, not just for her, but for everyone around her. Little did Sarah know her decision would set in motion a chain of events that would test her resolve, challenge her ethics, and ultimately redefine her understanding of leadership and integrity. Sarah's decision to take action led her down a path she never could have anticipated. Early the next morning, before the restaurant opened, she arrived at work determined to gather concrete evidence of the financial irregularities. As she entered her office, she noticed something was amiss. Her desk drawers were slightly ajar and papers seemed out of place. Heart racing, Sarah booted up her computer and accessed the financial records. To her horror, she discovered that several key files were missing. Someone had been in her office, someone who knew exactly what to look for. A soft knock on the door made her jump. It was Angela, looking worried. "Sarah, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sarah hesitated, then decided to confide in her assistant manager. "Angela, I need your help. Something big is going on and I think we're all in danger." Over the next hour, Sarah explained everything: the financial irregularities, Robert's confession, and now the missing files. Angela listened, her expression growing more serious by the minute. "Sarah, this is bigger than just our restaurant," Angela said finally. "I've heard rumors, whispers about similar issues in other franchises. How do you think we might be looking at a corporate-wide conspiracy?" The realization hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. If Angela was right, they were dealing with something far more dangerous than she had initially thought. Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the park across the street in 10 minutes. Come alone. It's about the money." Sarah showed the message to Angela, who shook her head vehemently. "It could be a trap. You can't go alone." But Sarah knew she had to take the risk. "Stay here," she told Angela. "If I'm not back in 30 minutes, call the police." The park was deserted when Sarah arrived. She scanned the area nervously, jumping at every rustle of leaves. Suddenly, a figure emerged from behind a tree. It was John, the former manager. "He knew you'd figure it out eventually, Sarah," he said, his voice a mix of admiration and resignation. "You're too smart for your own good." "John, what's going on? Who's behind all this?" John looked around nervously before speaking. "It goes all the way to the top, Sarah. The company's been cooking the books for years. Embezzlement, money laundering, you name it. And it's not just McDonald's. Other fast food chains are involved too." Sarah's mind reeled at the implications. But why? How? It started as a way to avoid taxes, but it grew into something much bigger. Now it's about power and control. The money, it's funding things you couldn't imagine. Before John could elaborate, a black SUV screeched to a halt nearby. 2 men in suits jumped out, heading straight for them. "Run," John yelled, pushing Sarah away. "Don't trust anyone." Sarah sprinted back to the restaurant, her heart pounding. She burst through the doors, startling the early morning staff. "Angela," she called out, "we need to." But Angela was nowhere to be seen. Instead, Mark approached, a smirk on his face. "Looking for your little helper? She's been reassigned." A chill ran down Sarah's spine as she realized the depth of the betrayal. She was alone, surrounded by people she couldn't trust, caught in a web of corruption that seemed to have no end. Over the next few days, Sarah felt like she was living in a nightmare. Strange cars parked outside her house at night. Her phone calls seemed to be monitored. Even her emails were acting strangely, with messages disappearing shortly after she read them. At work, the atmosphere was tense. Employees whispered behind her back, and she caught Mark and Lisa having hushed conversations that abruptly ended when she approached. Sarah tried to act normally, all the while frantically trying to figure out her next move. One evening, as Sarah was closing up the restaurant, she received another anonymous text. "We know about your mother's medical bills. Cooperate, and we'll make sure she gets the best care. Refuse and, well, healthcare is expensive these days." The threat to her family was the last straw. Sarah knew she had to act, but she also knew she couldn't do it alone. She needed allies, people she could trust implicitly. That night, after ensuring Emma and her mother were safe at a friend's house, Sarah made a series of calls. First to Robert Williams, then to a few trusted employees, and finally to a journalist friend she hadn't spoken to in years. "Meet me at the old factory on 5th Street at midnight," she told each of them. "It's time to end this." As Sarah drove to the meeting point, her mind raced with possibilities. Was she walking into a trap? Or was this the beginning of the end for the corruption that had taken over her life? She parked a block away from the factory and approached on foot, every sense on high alert. As she neared the building, she saw shadows moving inside. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the rusty door. Inside, she found Robert, 3 of her most trusted employees, and her journalist friend, all looking nervous but determined. "Thank you for coming," Sarah began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "What I'm about to tell you will sound unbelievable, but I swear it's the truth. And together, we're going to expose it all." As Sarah laid out everything she had discovered, from the initial financial irregularities to the vast conspiracy that seemed to encompass multiple corporations, she saw the shock and disbelief on their faces turn to anger and resolve. "This ends now," Robert said firmly when Sarah finished. "I was a coward before, but no more. We're going to make this right." The journalist Jane nodded in agreement. "I have contacts at major news outlets, so once we have concrete evidence, we can break this story wide open." For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope, but she also knew that the path ahead would be dangerous. The people behind this conspiracy had power, money, and a lot to lose. As the group began to plan their next moves, a noise outside made them all freeze. Headlights swept across the factory windows as multiple vehicles pulled up. "We've been found," Sarah whispered, her heart sinking. "Everyone quick, out the back." As they rushed towards the rear exit, Sarah realized that this was just the beginning of a long and perilous journey. The truth was within reach, but the cost of exposing it might be higher than she ever imagined. Yet as she looked at the determined faces of her newfound allies, she knew that there was no turning back. The fight for justice had begun, and Sarah was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The group fled through the back exit of the old factory, their hearts pounding in unison with their footsteps. Sarah led them through a maze of alleyways, constantly looking over her shoulder for signs of pursuit. Finally, they reached a small, nondescript motel on the outskirts of town. "We'll be safe here for now," Sarah said, ushering everyone into a room she had reserved under a false name. "We need to regroup and plan our next move." As they settled in, the gravity of their situation began to sink in. They were now fugitives, running from a powerful and far-reaching conspiracy. The weight of their choices hung heavy in the air. Robert was the first to break the silence. "I can't believe how deep this goes," he said, shaking his head. "I knew about the financial irregularities in our franchise, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined." Jane, the journalist, was already typing furiously on her laptop. "I've reached out to some of my most trusted contacts," she said. "We need to gather as much evidence as we can before we go public with this." Sarah nodded, feeling a mix of determination and fear. She looked around at the faces of her allies, Robert, Jane, and her trusted employees, Lisa and Tom. These were the people she was counting on, the ones who had chosen to stand with her despite the risks. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly, piecing together the puzzle of corruption that spanned multiple corporations. Sarah's knowledge of the McDonald's financial systems proved invaluable, while Jane's investigative skills helped them connect the dots to other companies involved in the scheme. As they worked, Sarah found herself growing closer to her teammates. She saw a side of Robert she had never known, a man determined to make amends for his past mistakes. Lisa's quick wit and Tom's steady presence became sources of comfort in their stressful situation. But it was Jane who surprised Sarah the most. The journalist's passion for uncovering the truth matched Sarah's own, and they often found themselves working late into the night, bouncing ideas off each other. One evening, as they were poring over some particularly complex financial records, Jane looked up at Sarah with a smile. "You know, when I got into journalism, this is the kind of story I dreamed of breaking," she said. "I never thought it would come from a McDonald's manager." Sarah laughed, feeling a warmth she hadn't experienced in weeks. "And I never thought I'd be working with a hotshot journalist to expose corporate corruption," she replied. "Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" Their moment of camaraderie was interrupted by a knock at the door. Everyone froze, exchanging worried glances. Sarah approached the door cautiously, her heart racing. "Who is it?" she called out. "It's me, Angela," came the reply. "Please, Sarah, let me in. I can explain everything." Sarah hesitated, remembering Angela's sudden disappearance and Mark's ominous words. But something in Angela's voice made her pause. "We can't trust her," Robert whispered urgently. "It could be a trap." But Sarah's instincts told her otherwise. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door. Angela stood there, looking disheveled and scared. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," she said, her voice breaking. "They threatened my family. I didn't have a choice." Sarah ushered her inside, where Angela broke down and confessed everything. She had been forced to cooperate with the conspirators, feeding them information about Sarah's activities. But the guilt had become too much to bear. "I want to help," Angela said, wiping away tears. "I have information that could be crucial to your investigation." The room was divided. Robert and Tom were skeptical, arguing that Angela's presence put them all at risk. But Lisa and Jane saw the potential value in the information she could provide. Sarah listened to both sides, weighing the risks against the potential benefits. Finally, she made her decision. "Angela stays," she said firmly. "We'll take precautions, but her information could be the key to blowing this whole thing wide open." As Angela began to share what she knew, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were one step closer to exposing the truth. But their progress was short-lived. The next morning, Sarah woke to find Jane's bed empty, her laptop gone. On the bedside table was a note: "I'm sorry. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. Forgive me." The betrayal hit Sarah like a physical blow. Jane, whom she had grown to trust and even admire, had sold them out. The information they had painstakingly gathered was now in the hands of their enemies. As the team reeled from this setback, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "We have your daughter. Surrender yourself, or she pays the price." Sarah felt the world spinning around her. She had tried so hard to keep Emma safe, to shield her from this nightmare. And now, her worst fear had come true. The others watched in concern as Sarah's face drained of color. "What is it?" Robert asked, his voice filled with dread. Sarah looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "They have Emma," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I have to go." "Sarah, no," Lisa exclaimed. "It's obviously a trap." "We'll find another way," Tom added, but his voice lacked conviction. Sarah shook her head. "There is no other way, not when it comes to my daughter." As she prepared to leave, gathering what little she had, Sarah turned to her team, the people who had risked everything to stand by her side. "I need you to promise me something," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "No matter what happens to me, you have to finish this. Expose the truth. Make sure all of this wasn't for nothing." But with tears in their eyes, they nodded, understanding the weight of the promise they were making. As Sarah walked out of the motel room, possibly towards her doom, she felt a strange sense of calm. She had started this journey to do the right thing, to stand up for what she believed in. And now, faced with the ultimate test, she knew she would do whatever it took to protect her daughter and see justice done. Little did Sarah know, her act of sacrifice was about to set in motion a chain of events that would shake the foundations of corporate America and test the limits of her own courage and integrity. Sarah's heart pounded as she approached the designated meeting point, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The weight of her decision pressed down on her with each step. She had left her allies behind, choosing to face this threat alone to protect her daughter. But as she neared the building, doubt crept in. Was she walking into a trap? Had she made the right choice? As she pushed open the rusty door, Sarah was greeted by the sight of several men in suits, their faces impassive. In the center of the room, tied to a chair, was Emma. Relief washed over Sarah at seeing her daughter unharmed, quickly followed by a surge of anger. Emma cried out, her voice a mix of fear and relief. "Let her go," Sarah demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "She has nothing to do with this." A man stepped forward, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the grimy surroundings. "Sarah Johnson," he said, his voice smooth and controlled. "I'm glad you could join us. I'm Mr. Daniels, and we have much to discuss." Sarah's mind raced, trying to place the name. Then it hit her. Daniels was one of the top executives at McDonald's corporate headquarters. The conspiracy truly did reach the highest levels. "What do you want?" Sarah asked, her eyes never leaving Emma. Daniels smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's quite simple, really. We want your silence. And in return, we're prepared to offer you a very comfortable life. Think about it, Sarah. No more financial struggles, the best medical care for your mother, a bright future for Emma." The offer hung in the air, tempting and poisonous. Sarah felt the weight of her responsibilities, to her family, to her allies, to the truth she had fought so hard to uncover. For a moment she allowed herself to imagine the life Daniels was offering. Financial security, her mother's health taken care of, Emma's future assured. It was everything she had ever wanted for her family. But at what cost? Sarah looked at Emma, seeing the fear and confusion in her daughter's eyes. What example would she be setting if she took this deal? How could she look Emma in the eye, knowing she had compromised everything she believed in? "And what happens to everyone else?" Sarah asked, buying time as she wrestled with her conscience. "The other employees, the customers who've been unknowingly part of this scheme?" Daniels waved his hand dismissively. "Collateral damage. The world of business is tough, Sarah. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good." "The greater good," Sarah repeated, incredulity creeping into her voice. "How is embezzlement and fraud for the benefit of a few at the top serving any greater good?" As Daniels launched into a practiced speech about economic realities and necessary evils, Sarah's mind whirled. She thought about her journey from a simple act of kindness to an elderly customer to uncovering a vast conspiracy. She thought about the people who had stood by her, risking everything for the truth. And she thought about the values she had always tried to instill in Emma: honesty, integrity, standing up for what's right. In that moment, Sarah knew what she had to do. "I'm sorry, Mr. Daniels," she said, cutting him off mid-sentence, "but I can't accept your offer. What you're doing is wrong, and I won't be part of it." Daniels's face hardened. "I'm disappointed to hear that, Sarah. I had hoped we could resolve this amicably. But if you insist on being difficult..." But he nodded to one of his men, who moved towards Emma. Sarah's heart leapt to her throat, but before anything could happen, the warehouse was suddenly flooded with light. The sound of sirens filled the air, and a voice boomed through a megaphone. "This is the FBI. The building is surrounded. Come out with your hands up." In the chaos that followed, Sarah rushed to Emma, quickly untying her. As FBI agents poured into the warehouse, Sarah saw familiar faces among them: Robert, Angela, Lisa, and Tom. They had followed her, unwilling to let her face this alone. The Daniels and his associates were led away in handcuffs. Sarah hugged Emma tightly, tears of relief streaming down her face. "And I'm so sorry you got caught up in this, sweetie," she whispered. Emma looked up at her mother, her eyes shining with a mixture of fear and admiration. "Mom, I heard what you said to that man. You didn't take his deal even when he threatened me. You stood up for what's right." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. "I had to, Emma. Some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost." As they walked out of the warehouse, Sarah was greeted by her team. Robert stepped forward, a look of pride on his face. "We couldn't let you do this alone, Sarah. Your courage inspired us all to take action." Angela nodded in agreement. "I contacted the FBI as soon as you left. We've been working with them to gather the final pieces of evidence needed to bring down the entire operation." Sarah looked at her friends, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing no words could truly express how she felt. As the adrenaline of the moment began to fade, Sarah realized that this was far from over. There would be investigations, trials, media scrutiny. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was no longer alone. She had a team, a support system, and most importantly, she had her integrity intact. In the days that followed, as the story broke and the full extent of the corruption was revealed to the public, Sarah found herself at the center of a media storm. She was hailed as a whistleblower, a hero who had risked everything to expose the truth. But for Sarah, the real victory wasn't in the headlines or the accolades. It was in the quiet moments, seeing the relief on her mother's face when she learned they wouldn't have to worry about medical bills anymore, watching Emma stand a little taller, proud of what her mother had accomplished. As Sarah sat in her living room, surrounded by her family and friends, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. It had started with a simple act of kindness, buying a meal for an elderly customer. That one decision had set off a chain of events that exposed corporate corruption, challenged her ethics, and ultimately reaffirmed her belief in the power of doing what's right. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But Sarah was ready to face them, armed with the strength of her convictions and the support of those who had stood by her side. As she looked around at the faces of her loved ones, Sarah felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had made the right choice, not just for herself, but for all those who had been affected by the corruption. And in doing so, she had discovered a strength within herself that she never knew existed. The journey had changed her, tested her, and ultimately made her stronger. And as she looked towards the future, Sarah knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with integrity, courage, and the unwavering belief that one person really could make a difference. The days following the dramatic warehouse confrontation were a whirlwind of activity. As news of the corruption scandal broke, it sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. Sarah found herself at the center of a media storm, her face splashed across newspapers and television screens new. The once quiet town was now buzzing with reporters, all eager to get a piece of the story. Camera crews camped outside Sarah's home and the McDonald's restaurant where it all began. The constant attention was overwhelming, and Sarah struggled to maintain a sense of normalcy for her family. But the media frenzy was just the beginning. As more details of the corruption came to light, the community began to grapple with the far-reaching implications of the scandal. It wasn't just McDonald's, other local businesses were implicated as well. The web of deceit stretched far and wide, touching nearly every aspect of the town's economy. Sarah watched with a heavy heart as the community she loved began to fracture. Long-standing friendships were strained as people questioned who knew what and when. The trust that had once been the foundation of their tight-knit community was now hanging by a thread. One morning, as Sarah was preparing for another day of interviews and meetings, she received a call from the mayor's office. The town was in crisis, and they needed her help. Arriving at the town hall, Sarah was met with a sea of angry faces. The room was packed with local business owners, employees who had lost their jobs in the fallout, and concerned citizens. The air was thick with tension and fear. The mayor, looking haggard and overwhelmed, approached Sarah. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "We're hoping you can help us make sense of all this. The people trust you, Sarah. They see you as a hero." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. As she took the podium, a hush fell over the crowd. She looked out at the faces of her neighbors, friends, and even some former adversaries, all waiting for her words. "I know you're all scared and angry," Sarah began, her voice steady. "I am too. What's happened here isn't just about one company or one group of corrupt individuals, and it's about a system that failed us all. But we have an opportunity now, an opportunity to rebuild, to create something better." As Sarah spoke, she could see the mood in the room begin to shift. The anger didn't disappear, but it began to transform into something else: determination, hope, a desire for change. But just as it seemed the community might be ready to come together, a new challenge emerged. Jane, the journalist who had betrayed Sarah and her team, published a sensationalized account of the scandal in a national magazine. The article painted a lurid picture of corruption and greed, with Sarah portrayed as a naive whistleblower in over her head. The story reignited the media frenzy and brought a new wave of scrutiny to the town. National news vans once again lined the streets, and reporters hounded local residents for quotes and insider information. Sarah was devastated. She had trusted Jane, and now that trust was being used to twist the narrative and further divide the community. The progress they had made at the town hall meeting seemed to evaporate overnight. Determined to set the record straight, Sarah decided to take a bold step. She reached out to a respected investigative journalist from a major newspaper, offering an exclusive interview to tell the full, unvarnished truth of what had happened. The day of the interview, Sarah sat across from the journalist, a no-nonsense woman named Clara Thompson. As they talked, Sarah held nothing back. She spoke of her initial discovery of the financial irregularities, the difficult choices she had to make, the betrayals and the triumphs. "What made you decide to blow the whistle, knowing the risks?" Clara asked. Sarah paused, considering her words carefully. "It wasn't one big decision," she finally said. "It was a series of small choices, each one leading to the next. Every time I chose to do the right thing, even when it was hard, it made the next choice a little easier. In the end, I realized I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent." As the interview progressed, Sarah could see Clara's demeanor change. The journalist's initial skepticism gave way to respect and even admiration. When the article was published a week later, it presented a nuanced, thoughtful account of the scandal and its aftermath. It didn't shy away from the complexities of the situation or the challenges still facing the community, but it also highlighted the courage of those who had stood up to corruption and the potential for positive change. The impact of the article was immediate and profound. It sparked a national conversation about corporate ethics and the importance of individual integrity. More importantly, it gave the local community a new perspective on the events that had upended their lives. In the wake of the article's publication, Sarah received an outpouring of support from people all over the country. Letters and emails flooded in, many from individuals inspired to take a stand against corruption in their own communities. But the most meaningful response came from her own neighbors. People who had been angry and suspicious now approached Sarah on the street to thank her. Local business owners reached out, asking for advice on how to operate more ethically. The tide was turning, but Sarah knew there was still much work to be done. The community's trust had been shaken to its core, and rebuilding it would take time and effort. As she walked through the town one evening, Sarah paused in front of the McDonald's where her journey had begun. The restaurant was closed now, a casualty of the scandal. But as she stood there, Sarah had an idea. an idea that could help heal the community and provide a fresh start for many who had lost their jobs. With renewed determination, Sarah headed home. She had a plan to propose, one that would challenge the community to come together and create something positive out of the ashes of scandal. As she walked, she felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt confident that their town could not only recover, but emerge stronger than ever. Little did she know, her idea would spark a movement that would extend far beyond the borders of their small town, challenging corporate culture and inspiring ethical leadership across the country. Sarah stood at the podium, her heart racing as she faced a sea of cameras and reporters. The town hall was packed, with people spilling out onto the street. This was the moment of truth, the day she would reveal everything she had uncovered about the corruption scandal that had rocked their community to its core. Taking a deep breath, Sarah began to speak. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Today, I'm here to share the full truth about what's been happening in our town, in our businesses, and yes, in our local McDonald's franchise." For the next hour, Sarah laid out the entire story, from her initial discovery of financial irregularities to the vast conspiracy that spanned multiple corporations. She spoke of the difficult choices she had to make, the threats she faced, and the unwavering support of those who stood by her side. As she spoke, Sarah could see the shock and disbelief on the faces of those in attendance. But there was something else too, a growing sense of anger and determination. "I know this is a lot to take in," Sarah continued, her voice steady. "But I believe that by exposing the truth, we can begin to heal and rebuild. We have an opportunity now to create a community and a business environment based on integrity and transparency." When Sarah finished speaking, the room erupted into a cacophony of voices. Reporters shouted questions, community members called out for justice, and amidst it all, Sarah stood firm, answering each query with honesty and clarity. As the press conference ended, Sarah was approached by the district attorney. "Ms. Johnson will need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement. Your testimony will be crucial in building our case." Sarah nodded, understanding that this was just the beginning of a long legal process. In the days that followed, the fallout from Sarah's revelation was swift and far-reaching. The stock prices of the implicated companies plummeted. Several high-ranking executives were arrested, their faces plastered across national news broadcasts. For Sarah and her family, the immediate aftermath was challenging. They received death threats and were forced to temporarily relocate for their safety. Emma struggled with the sudden notoriety, facing whispers and stares at school. But amidst the chaos, there were glimmers of hope. Sarah received countless messages of support from people around the country, many inspired by her courage to stand up against corruption. One evening, as Sarah was going through her emails, she came across a message that brought tears to her eyes. It was from an employee at another fast food chain, thanking Sarah for giving them the courage to speak up about similar issues in their own workplace. "Your story showed me that one person really can make a difference," the email read. "I've decided to come forward with what I know. Thank you for leading the way." Sarah realized then that her actions had sparked something bigger than she could have imagined. It wasn't just about one town or one company anymore. It was about inspiring a culture of integrity and accountability across the entire industry. As the dust began to settle, Sarah was approached by a group of local business owners. They wanted her help in establishing a new ethics committee for the town, aimed at preventing future corruption and promoting transparent business practices. "We need someone like you, Sarah," one of them said, "someone who's been through the fire and come out stronger. Will you help us?" Sarah agreed without hesitation. She saw it as an opportunity to turn their community's painful experience into a force for positive change. The work was challenging but rewarding. Sarah spent long hours drafting ethical guidelines, meeting with business owners, and speaking at local schools about the importance of integrity. One day, as she was leaving a meeting, Sarah ran into Mark, her former co-worker who had been skeptical of her from the beginning. To her surprise, he approached her with an extended hand. "I owe you an apology, Sarah," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. "I thought you were just stirring up trouble, but now I see what you were really doing. You saved a lot of us from being unwitting parts of something terrible." Sarah shook his hand, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. It was moments like these that made all the hardship worthwhile. As weeks turned into months, the town slowly began to heal. The McDonald's franchise reopened under new management, with Sarah serving as an advisor to ensure ethical practices were followed. So other businesses in town followed suit, eager to prove their commitment to transparency and integrity. Sarah's story began to spread beyond their small town. She was invited to speak at conferences and universities, sharing her experiences and inspiring others to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost. One evening, as Sarah sat on her porch watching the sunset, Emma joined her. "Mom," she said, her voice thoughtful, "I'm really proud of you. What you did, it changed everything." Sarah pulled her daughter close, feeling a surge of emotion. "Thank you, sweetie. You know, sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy, but it's always worth it." As they sat there, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. It had started with a simple act of kindness, buying a meal for an elderly customer. That one decision had set off a chain of events that exposed corruption, challenged her ethics, and ultimately reaffirmed her belief in the power of doing what's right. The road ahead was still long, with challenges yet to face, but Sarah felt ready for whatever came next. She had discovered a strength within herself that she never knew existed, and she was determined to use it to continue making a positive difference in the world. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Sarah felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had made the right choice, not just for herself, but for all those who had been affected by the corruption. And in doing so, she had helped create a ripple effect of positive change that would continue long into the future. If Sarah's journey has inspired you, if you believe in the power of integrity and ethical leadership, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment with the number 1 to let us know you enjoyed this story and would like to hear more like it. Your engagement helps us continue to bring you these powerful narratives of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. Together we can inspire a world where doing the right thing is always the right choice. The months following the revelation of the corruption scandal were a time of intense challenge and gradual healing for Sarah and her community. The initial shock had worn off, but the real work of rebuilding trust and reforming local businesses was only just beginning. Sarah found herself at the forefront of this effort, a role she embraced with determination despite its many difficulties. She worked tirelessly with the newly formed Ethics Committee, meeting with business owners, employees, and community members to address their concerns and implement new transparency measures. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah stood before the reopened McDonald's franchise, now under new management. The familiar golden arches gleamed in the sunlight, but the atmosphere was different. As she pushed open the door, she was greeted by the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of cheerful conversation. The new manager, a young woman named Rachel, approached Sarah with a warm smile. "We can't thank you enough for your guidance, Sarah. The changes we've implemented have made such a difference. Our employees feel valued, and customers tell us they trust us again." Sarah nodded, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "I'm glad I could help, Rachel. But remember, maintaining integrity is an ongoing process. We must remain vigilant." As she toured the restaurant, Sarah noticed the visible changes. There was a prominently displayed ethics hotline number for employees to report concerns anonymously, and the financial records were available for public review, a level of transparency that was unprecedented in the fast food industry. But not everyone was as receptive to change. Later that week, Sarah faced a hostile crowd at a town hall meeting. Local business owner Frank Stevens stood up, his face red with anger. "Who do you think you are, Sarah Johnson?" he shouted. "These new regulations are strangling small businesses. We can't all afford to implement these fancy ethics programs." The room erupted into murmurs of agreement and dissent. Sarah took a deep breath, reminding herself that change was never easy. "I understand your concerns, Frank," she said calmly, "but ethical business practices aren't just for big corporations. Protect all of us, owners, employees, and customers alike. Let's work together to find solutions that work for businesses of all sizes." As the meeting progressed, Sarah patiently addressed each concern, offering practical suggestions and compromises. And slowly, she could see the tension in the room begin to dissipate. By the end of the night, even Frank approached her with a grudging nod of respect. The challenges weren't limited to the business world. Sarah's personal life was also under scrutiny. One day, as she was grocery shopping with Emma, she overheard two women whispering behind her back. "There's that Sarah Johnson," one said. "Who does she think she is? Some kind of savior? I bet she's just in it for the fame." Emma's face fell, but Sarah squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Remember, sweetie," she said softly, "we can't control what others think or say. We can only control our own actions and know in our hearts that we're doing the right thing." Despite the occasional setback, positive changes were becoming more apparent in the community. The local newspaper ran a series of articles highlighting businesses that had successfully implemented ethical practices, showcasing the benefits to both employees and customers. Sarah was particularly proud when she learned that the high school had introduced an ethics and leadership course, inspired by her story. She was invited to speak to the students, an experience that left her feeling both humbled and hopeful for the future. As word of their town's transformation spread, Sarah began receiving invitations to speak at business conferences and universities across the country. At first, she was hesitant, not wanting to leave her family or the ongoing work in her community. But Emma and her mother encouraged her to share her experiences. "Your story could inspire others to stand up for what's right, Mom," Emma said. "You should go." So Sarah embarked on a series of speaking engagements, sharing her journey from fast food worker to whistleblower to community leader. She spoke of the challenges she faced, the difficult decisions she had to make, and the importance of staying true to one's values. After one such talk, a young man approached her, his eyes shining with determination. "Ms. Johnson, your story has inspired me to address some ethical issues in my own workplace. I was afraid before, but now I know it's the right thing to do." Moments like these reminded Sarah of the ripple effect of her actions, how one person's courage could inspire others to create positive change. Home, the ethics committee's work was bearing fruit. A survey showed that employee satisfaction in local businesses had increased significantly. Customer trust was on the rise, and there was a new sense of pride in the community. One evening, as Sarah walked through the town square, she noticed something that brought tears to her eyes. The old, vandalized billboard that had stood as a symbol of the town's decay had been replaced. The new sign read, "Welcome to our town, where integrity matters." It wasn't all smooth sailing, of course. There were still skeptics, still those who resisted change. But Sarah remained undeterred. She knew that real, lasting change took time and persistence. As she continued her work, Sarah often reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From a simple act of kindness in a fast food restaurant, uncovering a massive corruption scandal, to helping rebuild her community's trust and ethical foundation, it had been a transformative experience. She thought about the elderly customer she had helped that fateful day, wondering if he knew the chain of events he had set in motion. She thought about the colleagues who had stood by her side, the family that had supported her through the darkest times, and the community that was now coming together to create something truly special. Sarah realized that her journey was far from over. There would be new challenges to face, new battles to fight, but she was ready for them. She had discovered a strength within herself that she never knew existed, a capacity for leadership that had been forged in the fires of adversity. As she stood in the town square, looking at the new billboard, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had helped her community begin to heal, but there was still so much work to be done, not just in her town, but in businesses and communities across the country. With a determined smile, Sarah turned towards home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference, and she was ready to face them, armed with the knowledge that one person, acting with integrity and courage, really could change the world. As Sarah's story spread beyond the borders of a small town, it began to spark a movement that would challenge corporate culture across the country. What had started as one woman's stand against corruption in a local McDonald's franchise was now inspiring a wave of ethical reforms throughout the fast food industry and beyond. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah received a call from a number she didn't recognize. The voice on the other end introduced himself as James Thompson, the CEO of a major fast food chain. "I'm Miss Johnson," he said, his tone a mix of respect and nervousness. "I've been following your story, and I believe we need your help." "Our company, well, we've had our share of ethical issues. We want to change, but we don't know where to start." Sarah was taken aback. She had never expected her actions to reach this far. "Mr. Thompson," she replied carefully, "I appreciate your honesty. Change isn't easy, but acknowledging the need for it is a crucial first step." Over the next few months, Sarah found herself consulting with not just Thompson's company, but with several major players in the fast food industry. She worked with executive teams to implement transparency measures, establish ethical guidelines, and create channels for employees to report concerns without fear of retaliation. The changes weren't always smooth. In one particularly tense board meeting, Sarah faced resistance from a group of long-time executives. "This is ridiculous," one of them scoffed. "We're in business to make money, not to coddle employees or bend over backwards for every customer complaint." Sarah stood her ground. "Gentlemen," she said firmly, "ethical business practices and profitability are not mutually exclusive. In fact, in today's world, they're inextricably linked. Companies known for their integrity attract better employees, more loyal customers, and ultimately better returns for shareholders." What seemed to strike a chord, and slowly even the most skeptical executives began to come around. As news of these changes spread, Sarah started receiving invitations to speak at industry conferences. At one such event, she found herself addressing a room full of CEOs and high-level executives from various sectors. The fast food industry has long been associated with low wages, poor working conditions, and a lack of transparency, Sarah began. "But it doesn't have to be that way. We have an opportunity to lead by example, to show that even in a highly competitive, low-margin business, ethical practices can thrive." Her words resonated with many in the audience. After her speech, several executives approached her, eager to discuss how they could implement similar changes in their own companies. But it wasn't just the corporate world that was taking notice. Sarah's story had caught the attention of lawmakers as well. She was invited to testify before a congressional committee on corporate ethics and worker protection. As she stood before the committee, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. This was an opportunity to effect change at a national level. "Distinguished members of the committee," she began, her voice steady, "my journey began with a simple act of kindness in a McDonald's restaurant. It led me to uncover a web of corruption that extended far beyond one franchise. But what I've learned since then is that for every unethical business practice, there are countless employees who want to do the right thing. They just need the support and protection to do so." Sarah went on to advocate for stronger whistleblower protections, more robust ethical training programs, and increased transparency in corporate financial reporting. Her testimony, backed by her personal experience and the success of the changes she had helped implement, made a powerful impression. In the weeks that followed, Sarah watched with a mix of pride and humility as several of her recommendations began to make their way into proposed legislation. Back in her hometown, the ripple effects of Sarah's actions continued to be felt. The ethical business practices she had championed had led to improved working conditions and higher employee satisfaction across various industries. This, in turn, had attracted new businesses to the area, helping to revitalize the local economy. One day, as Sarah was having coffee with Emma at their favorite local cafe, she overheard a conversation at the next table. Two young employees were discussing their company's new ethics hotline. "I reported a safety concern last week," one of them said. "I was nervous, but they took it seriously and fixed the issue right away. It feels good to know they actually care about our well-being." Emma squeezed her mother's hand. "See, Mom, that's because of you. You're changing things for people you've never even met." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was moments like these that made all the challenges worthwhile. As Sarah's influence grew, she began to receive offers from various organizations. Political parties approached her about running for office. Fortune 500 companies offered her lucrative positions on their boards. Publishing houses clamored for her to write a book about her experiences. Each offer was tempting in its own way, but Sarah found herself hesitating. She thought back to where her journey had started, in a small McDonald's restaurant, simply trying to do the right thing. She didn't want to lose sight of that initial purpose. After much reflection, Sarah decided to establish a non-profit organization dedicated to promoting ethical business practices and supporting whistleblowers. She named it the Integrity First Foundation. Through the foundation, Sarah was able to continue her work on a larger scale. She developed training programs for companies, provided resources for employees facing ethical dilemmas, and offered legal support to whistleblowers. One of the foundation's first initiatives was a scholarship program for students committed to studying business ethics. At the inaugural award ceremony, Sarah looked out at the young faces full of passion and determination and felt a sense of hope for the future. "You are the leaders of tomorrow," she told them. "Never underestimate the power of one person to make a difference. Your integrity, your courage to stand up for what's right, can change not just a company, but an entire industry." As Sarah continued her work, she often reflected on the long journey that had brought her to this point. From a simple fast food worker to a national figure in business ethics, her path had been anything but straightforward. There had been moments of doubt, of fear, of overwhelming challenges. But through it all, she had held on to a core belief that doing the right thing, no matter how difficult, was always worth it. The fast food industry, once synonymous with corporate greed and worker exploitation, was now leading the way in ethical business practices. Other sectors were following suit, recognizing that in the modern world, integrity was not just a moral imperative, but a business necessity. Sarah knew that the work was far from over. There would always be those who sought to exploit others for personal gain, always new challenges to face. But she also knew that she had helped spark a movement, one that was growing stronger every day. As she looked towards the future, Sarah felt a sense of quiet determination. The journey that had begun with a simple act of kindness had transformed not just her life, but the lives of countless others. And she was ready for whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that one person, acting with integrity and courage, really could change the world. Dear friends, Sarah Johnson's journey reminds us that true heroism often begins with a single act of kindness. It's about having the courage to stand up for what's right, even when the whole world seems to be against you. Remember, every time you choose integrity over convenience, every time you speak up against injustice, you're not just changing your own life, you're creating ripples that can transform entire communities, industries, and even nations. You might feel small and insignificant in the face of corruption and greed. You might think, what difference can one person really make? But Sarah's story shows us that one person's courage can ignite a flame of change that spreads far and wide. Think about the moments in your life when you stood at a crossroads, facing a choice between what's easy and what's right. Those moments define us, they reveal our true character. Sarah's journey teaches us that our integrity is our most valuable possession. It's the foundation upon which we build trust, respect, and meaningful change. When we compromise our values, we lose a part of ourselves that's hard to regain. But when we stay true to our principles, even in the face of adversity, we discover a strength within ourselves that we never knew existed. We become beacons of hope for others, inspiring them to find their own courage. So, the next time you're faced with a difficult decision, remember Sarah Johnson. Remember that your actions, no matter how small they might seem, have the power to create a better world. Your voice matters. Your integrity matters. To be the person who stands up when others sit down. Be the one who speaks out when others stay silent. Be the change you wish to see in the world. Because in the end, it's not about the battles we win or lose. It's about knowing that we had the courage to fight for what's right. It's about leaving a legacy of integrity that will inspire generations to come. You have that power within you. Use it. The world is waiting for heroes like you. We want to express our heartfelt gratitude for joining us on this incredible journey through Sarah Johnson's story. Your support and engagement are the driving force behind our passion for creating these inspiring narratives. Your thoughts and opinions matter to us, and we'd love to hear from you. Your feedback not only motivates us, but also helps us craft even more compelling stories in the future. If Sarah's journey resonated with you and you enjoyed this story, please leave a comment with the number 1. Your support means the world to us and encourages us to continue sharing these powerful tales of courage and integrity. Excited to hear what happens next in Sarah's life? If you're eager for a part 2, let us know by commenting with the number 2. Your enthusiasm guides our creative process. We also value your honest opinions. If there are aspects of the story you disagree with or areas you think we could improve, please share your thoughts in the comments. Your constructive feedback helps us grow and deliver better content. Lastly, if you haven't already, we kindly invite you to subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just supporting our team, you're joining a community dedicated to sharing inspirings that can change lives. Hit that subscribe button to ensure you never miss our upcoming narratives of courage, integrity, and the power of individual action. Remember, every view, every comment, and every subscription fuels our passion and enables us to continue bringing you these extraordinary stories. Thank you for being part of our journey. Together, let's continue to inspire and be inspired.